Story 1. The Notebook. Allie is engaged but goes in search of Noah, and when she finds him, she sleeps with him despite her engagement. It is a glorified act of infidelity. I can't believe the number of people who find it romantic. Story 2. What is the message it conveys? Is it advocating for becoming a second-hander and abandoning your values to be liked by someone else? Story 3. Titanic. They prolonged Jack's death for 45 minutes. Felt long and boring. In reality, Jack turned into an ice cube within about 3 minutes. I wanted to drown him myself. Story 4. La La Land. I kept waiting for the plot to develop, but it never did. It felt like a really long music video with pretty lights and no emotional payoff. Story 5. Whatever the newest Matrix movie is called. I am easily entertained and do not like spending money on a movie ticket. I was upset that I paid to see that. Story 6. I wouldn't say I absolutely hate it, and props to the animators, but I really don't like A Nightmare Before Christmas. It strikes me as some edgy concept and the songs are not good, in my opinion. Story 7. Amadeus. I am a musician and understand the competition that develops between musicians. In Amadeus, Salieri becomes jealous of Mozart's natural talent, but instead of seeking to improve as a composer, Salieri obsesses over how unfair it is that Mozart is so talented. It seems irrational, especially since Salieri, as a court composer, was professionally successful and financially stable, and really had no reason to feel threatened by the talented but socially inept Mozart. Story 8. Pretty much everything by Wes Anderson or Jason Schwartzman has beautiful and unique cinematography. However, I feel that they try too hard to be quirky. The humor falls flat for me, and I never care about any of the characters or the plot. They all seem superficially weird to make them interesting. As someone who attended an elite film school at the beginning of the hipster movement, his films feel very much like film school projects to me. Granted, Wes Anderson had already been refining this style for decades by that point. Story 9. Deadpool. Most of the films Ryan Reynolds stars in portray him as sarcastic and essentially the same character. It seems as though he is written into each role, with the Deadpool films taking it up a few notches. Story 10. Love Actually. I find it too cheesy and inauthentic. Now you see me, it tries to act smart while being very foolish. The Notebook. I believe there are much better romantic movies. The Greatest Showman sacrifices realism for exaggerated musical performances and convenient plot points. Warning. Controversial. Good Will Hunting. The protagonist never felt like a real person. He was a caricature of a genius. He did not put in effort in academics but was brilliant in everything, presenting a highly inaccurate version of academic excellence. Story 11. Nosferatu. Depp maintains the same expression throughout the film, except when she is supposedly possessed and makes an absurd face. The entire film felt like satire, with amateur attempts at creating dynamic angle changes during weak exchanges of cliched dialogue. Skarsgård delivered strong character work, and Holt performed well. However, even Dafoe's performance seemed lacking compared to his usual high standard. Despite the impressive cinematography, there is little redeeming about this tedious production. Story 12. Dazed and Confused. It lacks a plot, the characters are unbearable, it is extremely boring, and nothing significant occurs. I can't believe people actually enjoy it. Story 13. Everything Wes Anderson has ever made, from the aesthetics to the lighting to the humor, annoys me. I know there's a more articulate way to explain it, and I don't want to label him as pretentious. It feels more like he's trying too hard to come across as an intellectual and highbrow. Story 14. I find it boring and not impressive since its release. I am a huge movie enthusiast and usually watch one film a night, but I do not understand the hype surrounding Inception. Story 15. Pulp Fiction. It was about an hour too long. There were too many plot lines, so once I began to get invested in one, it was over. I also thought it was unnecessarily graphic. I know it was purposefully done, but I personally thought it was unneeded, especially the scene that was particularly disturbing and entirely irrelevant to the plot. A lot of things occurred, but not much actually happened, if you understand what I mean. Story 16. The Usual Suspects. Besides disliking Kevin Spacey before it was popular, it is the most pointless movie ever. Oh my God. He was the mastermind all along. No, he is not. He is just an unreliable narrator who misled you for 2 hours. Story 17. Interstellar, because the center of the universe is your daughter's bedroom, is a leap of faith I will not take. Nolan's movies, aside from Batman and 1917, are often hit or miss. Story 18. Lost in translation. I cannot feel sorry for Scarlett Johansson's character. I actually kind of loathe her by the end. Story 19. Marvel movies are not very faithful to the source material, and comics are better. Additionally, they lack excitement. Story 20. I have never liked films such as Interstellar or Inception. I believe they are overhyped, so when they don't blow my mind or if I just don't understand them, it ruins the experience for me. To be fair, I am not really a fan of those types of films to begin with. I prefer to watch a movie to relax, not to analyze complex concepts. I have simple tastes. I enjoy dragons, sword fights, magic, intense action sequences, and one-liners. One of my favorite films is Reign of Fire, which has no high concept, just Christian Bale trying to survive in a dragon-inhabited apocalypse. Story 21. The Matrix is slow, poorly acted, and boring. It fetishizes guns. Additionally, the concept that we live in a simulation is not groundbreaking. My friends and I were speculating about this when we were 12. Story 22, 2001. A Space Odyssey. HAL 9000 was impressive, but the rest was nonsensical. Actually, come to think of it, most of Stanley Kubrick's films missed the mark for me. Story 23. Hereditary is a minimal story that is not particularly unique or scary. It is simply overrated on Reddit. I am aware that I may face backlash for this opinion. Story 24. The film was poorly executed and lacked substance. The characters were uninteresting, and the plot was predictable. The use of racial themes at the Oscars felt forced, and while it was creative, I do not believe it deserves the title of the best movie of the year. I found it tedious and unappealing. I'm not a fan. Story 25. The Batman, 2022. Overall, it has clumsy writing and characters, with many contrived story elements and a weak overall plot. It is largely carried by the amazing performances of Robert Pattinson and Paul Dano. Story 26. The Little Mermaid conveys a troubling message to girls. In the story, the mermaid endures significant suffering after her transformation and ultimately turns into sea foam. The prince does not marry her as she cannot speak. This situation is quite unfortunate. Story 27. I always got outvoted by my brothers regarding what to watch, and I dislike the original films and the prequels. However, Ander gets a pass. Story 28. It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, it's not because it's slower paced like old-fashioned movies, which is part of its charm. But honestly, the main character is so unlikable that I just think, please just end it. You really are the worst. Even when the angel shows him everything, I'm still frustrated. No, he did a few kind things in the past, but so what? In the present, he is insufferable. Story 29, American History X. People are proud of the main character for changing. I don't see him as changing. It doesn't feel like he is trying to make amends. It feels to me like he just chooses not to be out there with the others. Story 30, Titanic. Rose was the real villain, and I remember that the movie came out right around testing time in school. For 8 hours straight, I had to hear the theme song on replay from the girl sitting next to me. She had headphones on, and it was still painful. Story 31, Spider-Man. Across the Spider-Verse is boring and uninteresting. The story is disorganized and makes no sense. I didn't even understand what the movie was about after leaving the theater. It was the only film I considered walking out of before it ended, and if I hadn't paid to see it, I would have. It was terrible. Story 32. All the dialogue felt so unnatural to me. I'm not talking about the interaction between Joaquin Phoenix and the artificial intelligence, but between real people, for example, during the blind date near the beginning of the movie. What I disliked even more was the intimate scene with the AI. It was utterly ridiculous and not at all what I imagine intimacy with artificial intelligence would look like. Felt like a scene from a Terrence Malick movie, pretentious and trying to be profound, but failing miserably. I turned the movie off after that. I might give it another chance sometime. Maybe I just wasn't in the right mood for it. Story 33, Challengers. Everyone said it was a good movie. I regularly watch movies over Discord with my closest friends. It's how we keep in touch since we all graduated from college and moved back to our hometowns. He begged me to watch it, and ultimately I gave in and said fine. I hated every second of it. The plot was not enjoyable. The characters were not engaging. The soundtrack honestly wasn't good. The music itself was good, but as a soundtrack to a tennis movie, it just felt out of place to me. I truly felt like I wasted 2 hours of my life. I even told him that to make up for it, he would have to watch one of my movies from a genre he doesn't like. Story 34. The Holiday is a film that many people love, even those who are not big fans of romantic comedies. However, I find it boring and not particularly great. The same goes for Crazy Stupid Love. I didn't watch it until it had been out for 10 years, so perhaps I missed the opportunity to appreciate it more, but I did not enjoy it. Story 35. Honora. How did this movie with a poor plot and average acting win an Oscar? It appeared free on one of my streaming services. The trailer looked unappealing, but since it won a couple of Oscars, I figured I'd check it out. Big mistake. The Oscar selections used to hold significance. Now, I'm not sure. Story 36. I am a lover of almost anything from the 1980s, but I have to go with Top Gun. It is just so bad, soundtrack, acting, you name it. That being said, rest in peace Val Kilmer. He was the best thing to come out of that movie. Story 37. I watched Fight Club for the first time last week, and I'm not sure about its universal appeal. I would rate it a 6 out of 10. Story 38. Frozen mostly because the music is annoying to me, and for some reason I just can't stand Idina Menzel. Story 39. I already had one answer, but as a film enthusiast, I feel compelled to answer this question multiple times. This particular response often gets me downvoted for admitting it. I don't actually dislike this movie, but I have started to, primarily due to how much everyone else praises it. Knives Out. To me, it's just slightly above average for a standard mystery film. I mean, it's much better than any of the other mystery films released recently, like the Agatha Christie adaptations that have been poorly received. I believe another reason people like it so much is that it features actors in roles very different from the characters they typically portray. I understand the appeal of that, but in many cases, the characters seem self-aware. They feel just barely on the surface of the actors themselves. It's somewhat like watching sketch comedy, where you feel the performers are on the brink of breaking character the entire time. I find it amusing that every time a variation of this question has been posted, and I respond with Knives Out, I am downvoted without any comments. It somewhat proves it's a good answer when everyone disagrees. Story 40, Trainspotting. Actually, I don't know if I hate it because I couldn't get myself to get past 20 minutes. It was visually unappealing. I recognize it's a cult movie, but I just didn't like the aesthetic. It made me uncomfortable, just like a Clockwork Orange. Story 41, Coraline. I appreciate most of Tim Burton's work, but this one is not for me. The main character, Coraline, is not very likable. She is unkind to everyone, including the cat. Story 42. I feel like I might get more than a few downvotes for this one, but here it goes. Lord of the Rings. My wife's manager convinced her to watch it for the first time. We watched the first movie and were bored out of our minds. We had to keep turning up the volume to hear anything being said, could hardly understand half of what we could hear, and found the whole plot and story to be extremely boring. We thought, surely it gets better as we go, and maybe they'll explain things we didn't understand. So we decided to give the second movie a shot. We watched this movie for what felt like half a day, only to become more confused by what was happening. We experienced just as much difficulty hearing and understanding the dialogue, and became so bored we were fighting sleep, only to find out we still had another hour left. Felt like the movies never end, but nothing important actually happens. Or does it? I don't know, because I can't hear a thing they are saying. I edited this because now I can't stop thinking about it. I am usually pretty bad with faces to begin with, so I thought maybe it was just me, but my wife, who is usually great with faces, could hardly tell who was who. They all look the same. As far as I can tell, the characters of Lord of the Rings, at least up to the point I watched, are Frodo, Sam, Gandalf, Will Turner, never actually could hear what his name was, a dwarf, and a human. Were there other hobbits? Probably. Or maybe they just put Frodo in different clothes. Were there other humans? Likely, although it could have just been a generic human covered in slightly more dirt. Story 43, Elf is, like most Will Ferrell movies, very annoying. I really can't stand him, and Elf is the worst of all his films. Story 44, most non-animated movies are challenging for me. I struggle to see the actors as their characters and become invested in the story. I can only view them as performers reciting a memorized script. Story 45. Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter feature characters with magical abilities and flying creatures. This portrayal is frustrating. Can someone just intervene directly? Story 46. The American President features Annette Bening and Michael Douglas. I don't know why, but this movie irritates me. That said, this movie inspired the acclaimed television show The West Wing, which is probably my all-time favorite show in television history. Story 47. Many people seem to love the 2018 film Burning, and I don't understand why. It's long, it ends as soon as something actually happens, it treats the audience like they are uninformed, the characters are one-dimensional and unlikable, and it proves that a film being lengthy, slow, and in a language other than English does not automatically make it good. I dislike this movie immensely. Story 48. The Holdovers. I believe that aside from Giamatti's performance, it is an entirely superficial exercise in aesthetics that glorifies the worst kind of nostalgia and treats its black characters as props. Story 49. Grease is a poorly acted musical and one of the worst I have seen. It's a great story that highlights the absurdity of a capitalist society treasuring it. The acting is terrible, and it's no surprise it was such a flop that cable companies aired it for free all the time. Story 50. Anything made by Jordan Peele reveals a creator overwhelmed by his own ego. Everything he produces comes off as pretentious. There is little substance in his work. It all feels like an attempt at art. It seems clear to me that he is surrounded by people who only affirm him. No one is willing to provide honest feedback. He lacks the insight to recognize how lacking in creativity his work is because nobody is openly critical of him, likely due to his popularity from Key and Peele. Story 51. Forrest Gump was a disappointing film with a great soundtrack. I disliked everything about it except for the music. Part of my opinion may stem from its overhyped nature, but I simply do not understand why it is such a beloved movie. Story 52. I was not a fan of Amelie when it came out. It was super popular, but it gave me annoying manic pixie dream girl vibes. Story 53. I may face criticism for this opinion, but here it is: How to Train Your Dragon. I find the dragons unattractive. Toothless design is acceptable with its gecko and salamander appearance, but I believe the name is unappealing. While many appreciate the movie for its engaging story, the appearance of the other dragons throughout the series discourages me from wanting to watch it. I acknowledge that I may be superficial, but that is my perspective. Story 54. Love Actually should be titled Lust Actually. The only good story is the one where the man realizes he was foolish for even contemplating cheating on his wife. Emma Thompson was brilliant, but she dealt with a cheating husband in the egotistical Kenneth Branagh. She played against Alan Rickman exceptionally well. Don't get me wrong, the cast was outstanding. However, the premise was weak and the writing lacked originality. I've read better in inexpensive romance novels. Story 55. I disliked the main character from the beginning. I also did not like the outfits in the movie, which receive a lot of praise. I understand that they are costumes for a story, but I still do not like them. I cannot empathize with the main character. Additionally, the fact that she starts kissing her stepbrother at the end is concerning. Story 56. The Big Lebowski. The plot was difficult to follow, the jokes were not funny, and one of the main characters is bullied throughout the movie and abruptly killed off by the end. James Goodman's character was unlikable. None of the plot would have occurred if he had just remained silent. He only escalates every conflict and faces no consequences. I would have preferred if he were the one to die. That movie wasted my time, and I do not understand the appeal. Story 57. Titanic. First, going by the title alone, I expected a recreation of the events that happened on the Titanic. Yes, they told that story, and it should have ended there. Second, why create a character who caused Jack's death by not letting him on the door she was on and telling a love story over a one-night encounter they shared? Third, why tell a story if it cannot accurately depict the events like in A Night to Remember? Then again, it is just my opinion, and I do not expect anyone else to agree. Story 58. Saltburn features a poorly developed and insufferable protagonist who resorts to murder throughout the film. I didn't see the point of the movie at all. Story 59. Most of Quentin Tarantino's films have their merits. While there are a few good ones, many others are underwhelming. Inglourious Bastard is a prime example, in my opinion. There are a couple of notable dialogue scenes, but as a whole, I feel the film is somewhat disjointed. Story 60. Titanic. Rose's husband was poised to save her and her family from financial ruin and would have treated her very well. Instead, she ended up being involved with a transient she met that day. She spent the rest of her life with life-changing money, keeping it a secret from her family. Ultimately, she chose to discard it because she loved a transient she knew for just a day or two more than her husband and family with whom she had spent years. She is portrayed as a deeply flawed character, and Jack was not much better. Story 61. Dr. Strangelove. It's just not funny. No fighting in the war room isn't funny enough to carry an entire movie. It's a weak joke, and it's the only one that anyone ever quotes because it's considered the funniest line in the film. Story 62. Mandy. I found it difficult to engage with the film. The first part was very slow, and the second part felt too different. I believe I simply dislike anything by Panos Cosmatos, as I also had a strong negative reaction to his episode of Cabinet of Curiosities. Story 63. A Christmas Story. I hated it when I was a kid, and I still hate it now. I never had one specific reason. I just think it is a silly movie idea. Story 64. Space Odyssey. I dislike that movie. I tried to find it suspenseful and slow, but for me, it ended up being incredibly boring. There are scenes that last 7 minutes of a ship flying in space in a straight line with nothing else happening, or the movie having a seizure at the end, along with other incredibly slow scenes that have no good reason to be that way. This movie is very slow. Then you get a quick minute of something actually happening, and it goes back to being slow. I thought 2010 was much better in terms of watchability. Story 65. The Batman. I don't actually hate it, but it's the worst version of Batman. He feels like a rookie police officer in armor. Story 66. Paris, Texas. It was one of the few videos I had to turn off. It was that boring. The critics loved it, so the reviews misled me. Story 67. Midsommar. The characters are poorly developed, the pace is slow, the dialogue is lacking, and the ending is unsatisfactory. It seems to be aimed at teens who have had one relationship and experienced a breakup after 6 months, believing it to be a major life-altering event. Story 68. I watched Spirited Away with my family, thinking it was a really special movie, but it ended up being a waste of time. Felt like a weird and meaningless anime. Can someone at least explain the plot? The post was literally asking if there is a movie you specifically don't like, so downvotes don't make sense. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.